As an Australian, one thing that I'm really, really passionate about is essential oils that are native to our great land. And we have some amazing essential oils that are available. Now, in the past, I've had the chance to discuss oils such as the amazing Rosalina and some of our beautiful myrtles like anise myrtle and pineapple myrtle, with who I regard to be the queen of Australian essential oils. If she doesn't know it, it's not worth knowing. Deby Atterby, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, that's such a lovely introduction. Thank you, Adam. Yes. Well, I must say, my life is Australian essential oils. That's definitely a big tick in that box for sure.
Now, I'm really excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking about Fragonia. Now, Fragonia is native to my home state of Western Australia. So I was wondering if you can tell me, before we dive into the oil, a little bit about the plant.
Yeah. Okay. So in our First Nation people or Australian Aboriginal or whatever people seem to take that on with at the moment, they had a special name for that sort of tea tree plant, and that's what they looked at. Even this particular Fragonia, they saw that because it is, exactly like the tea tree in its own variety. Like it has a lot of antibacterial and antifungal processes with it, with a very charming and unique smell. And they used to call this the Kalara, which is really quite different. I'm not sure whether your listeners are aware, but the actual particular species grows down south of where you live. Now, I'm not exactly sure where you are, but in Western Australia, it actually grows down in the wetlands down there. And when they distill it, they take the new branchlets, and they also take the leaves, and they work with it in a steam distillation process. And it actually was Peter and Peter and John Day who started planting this particular plant itself. They first of all opened up a tea tree farm over not far from where you are, and that was around about 19, I think it was 1997 or 98, and they were growing tea tree for some time, and then they came across this particular species. And so they decided around about 2001 to start planting the Fragonia. And that's where it really started to take its place. And we did have amazing growth. It took off well, but they also went through some horrible disasters with a fire. And I think that fire had gone through in around about 2008 and really took it down. So they worked very, very hard. They were a wonderful, wonderful crew of people, and a really strong business family as well. So it's great. Yeah.
But it is a really beautiful, unique essential oil that we get. How do you tend to use it as an aromatherapist? Where are you reaching for this essential oil?
Look, most of the time, Adam, I have to be totally honest with you. I have set my goals, and I suppose I work with it within this scope, and that's kind of like working with things like anxiety and people that have sleep issues, and the one thing that I have had of a late in clinical practice is I've had two clients come through with nervous breakdowns, and so I have been actually working with this using what acupressure pointing and using a blend with the actual Fragonia to help balance out the nervous system. And I work with a technique called the C method of massage, which actually works with the whole nervous system, whether it's the peripheral or the central nervous system. It actually balances for the whole part of the body systems with the nerves so that they can actually get some sort of equilibrium going back into their recovery. Does that make sense? Yeah, I hope that did.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in your book you do share a bit of a blend. Would you share with us what oils you like to blend with Fragonia for that type of situation?
Yeah. Okay. So I've always, citrus seems to always work really well for me, whether I take on, say, the orange oil or whether I take on a mandarin oil. They're the ones that I really love to come in and, true to itself. I mean, I would use Australian. So not that I wouldn't use any other oils, but, I try and stick with the common essential oils that are grown in Australia, like those oranges and mandarin. And I also do work with the Tasmanian lavender there, and that's where the Fragonia and some sandalwood would come into that as well. That would be used in a massage blend for them for these particular ailments that they may be coming in with the anxiety or stress related things, or even with the nervous breakdown.
So in your practice, you'd be mixing the citrus, the Fragonia, the sandalwood, and the lavender in a massage carrier oil and giving a massage, focusing on those acupressure points.
Absolutely, 100%. That's exactly. Gee, you should. I've already taught you something. You could now become me.
There we go. Well, not quite yet, not quite yet. But one of the things, let's talk a little bit more about chemistry for a moment. Sometimes Fragonia, I've heard it being nicknamed the golden triangle because its chemistry is quite unique. It almost has
Yeah,
an equal balance of cineols, monoterpene, is it monoterpenes with alpha pinene being
that's
a
right.
key constituent, and monoterpenols with linalool. So,
That's
to bring that down to someone who's not maybe up with the chemistry as much, we often see, alpha pinene in oils such as pine and frankincense. We
yes,
often see linalool in oils like lavender, and we see 1,8-cineol in oils like eucalyptus. So I
yeah.
can sometimes think that maybe if eucalyptus, frankincense, and lavender had a love child, Fragonia would be it, and it's got all the good
Good enough.
bits.
Maybe
Yeah,
maybe they had a quick trip overseas or something. I don't know. Maybe that happened. They did have a love child, but let me say that this is a unique oil in itself. I mean, there are a lot of really unique oils, and that particular golden triangle was actually those words were given from Dr. Penwell when he came out in 2008, and he was actually working with the days they were on the farm, and he was looking at that oil. But yes, it was a very nice balance of monoterpenes and oxides and monoterpenols, which gave it that triangle effect, which he actually called it the harmonizing or something and balancing. But to me, I see that golden triangle as not only harmonizing, balancing, but also healing, because you see, when you actually take that oil on, it's working on those three facets. So that's the important part of it. It's not only working on the higher level, it's taking those side levels of our body and flattening us out. So it gives us full capacity of balancing out through whatever the problem is. And, with the oxides, for instance, we're going to be here in that respiratory area. And, then, but they are so well balanced out that it's one of those essential oils which seem to be much more safer to look at with more, people on the side of aging and things like that. It's not too harsh, and because it's got that balance, it's balancing everything out, so it becomes quite a very safe oil within itself.
and you're referring to it being kind of similar, or even our First Nations people saw it as being a bit like a tea tree, and sometimes tea tree people think can be a bit harsh. The fragrance of this and probably the impact of this, it's softer, but definitely not weaker. Would you agree with that?
I don't think it's at all weaker. In fact, I
Yeah.
think the synergy of that particular plant itself, I think what it has impacted there is it's made it much stronger, because you're taking those three types of chemistries at a very balanced area. So it's sort of giving it, what can I say, a behind punch. It's sort of giving it that sort of,
Yeah.
well, that safe, but that uh, real strength of being able to, but in a very mild way. I don't know how to say that. So synergistically, because of the monoterpene, monoterpenols, or your linalols and apanenes and things like that, and your oxides, because they're so beautifully balanced, it kind of makes it powerful, but it makes it gentle.
Yep.
It
No, that,
makes
that does
healing.
make that. I guess because it doesn't have any extremes. And extremes can sometimes, an oil that has a high level of something, we've got to be wary of that. We think of
Well,
oils like maybe
especially
birch or wintergreen. Too much methyl salicylate could be a problem. Yeah.
or very high in 1,8 cineol, there in itself can create issues itself, especially, when we're working with children and things. But I always love that this particular plant was always known also to, say, our first white settlers and things, they would call it the coarse tea tree, and yet it is such a gentle oil, and yet its other name would be called coarse tea tree. And I always think, oh, that's a funny thing to call it, because it is coarse. The plant. Have you felt it before? Have you
No,
ever?
I haven't had the privilege of doing that yet. No.
Yeah, so I suppose its foliage is quite coarse as well, but yeah, it is really such a balanced oil. It's a top oil. I absolutely adore it. I love it. Well, along with everything else, I suppose.
Maybe to go with a fairy tale, we could call it the Goldilocks oil. Not too much of everything, not too little of everything. It's just right.
Just
Yeah.
right. Maybe we could do that. Maybe we could make a nursery rhyme out of it. That would
Fragonia. There we go. That's something for another day. Now, what about for skin? Could we use Fragonia for any kind of skin challenges or just overall skin health?
Absolutely. And these are sort of things that we look at. Like we say to using our tea tree for antifungals and things like that. Here is where I step in a little bit and say, well, sometimes tea tree could be, a little bit more aggressive because it was higher in your one a terpenol fours, and that maybe not something that people like because that's a strong, aggressive, more smell. Where this is a soft, gentle smell, and so it kind of goes nicely with children, and treating maybe more so them with that than such tea tree would probably be a good substitute.
What about things like acne as kids are getting a little bit older and teenagers? Would it be helpful in that regard?
Absolutely. Look, anything to do with skin, but the people must be very aware though. It doesn't matter what we feel and how I'm talking about it being a beautiful, harmonizing, and gentle type of essential oil. In the world of someone who hasn't really done a lot of excess studies and things, please remember it's really important that they do use a carrier behind this so that there is no issues with irritation. Not that I have ever, honestly, say to you that I've ever heard of anybody having an allergy against this, but they do quote that, if you have an allergy against tea tree, you may find that this could create allergies. So we need to cover all bases and be sensible and think of dosage.
Very much so. Now, one thing that really interested me when I was kind of reviewing Fragonia in your book is that you mentioned perimenopause and menopause.
Yeah.
Now, that is something that I've found, especially over the last couple of years, even as a male, the
Mm.
amount of women who have opened up to me and spoken to me about the challenges of how it just basically rips the rug from under them.
Yeah.
And I believe Fragonia could possibly be part of supporting them.
And that's very true. You see, the big thing is with me, Adam, obviously being such a young person, I'm sure you can see that. I went through, whilst going through perimenopause and going through menopause, I really put Fragonia at the top of my mark. Obviously, it has to be formulated with a blend. It's not just Fragonia on its own, but of course it's the highest part of that blend. And I was using it very much so through the pineal area and working on pressure points and things like that to help with getting through that stages. Now, I have to be really honest with you. I never went on to any medication at all. Yes, I may have had a few bumps in the road, and because it works so well with anxiety and stress and your emotions, that Fragonia really got me through there without any medication at all.
So, in that regard, is Fragonia working more on kind of the emotional and the mental
Certainly.
ups and downs throughout that stage rather than the hormone balancing aspect?
I would say that that's where we're looking at, because I was using other oils, obviously, which would help with the hormonal balancing of that. But it was really helping with that anxiety and that sort of pet up. And the problem is when women do start to go through perimenopause and then hit menopause, we've also got the other areas where we're looking at, that rapid hot flushing and things like that, and loss of sleep and things like that. So being able to utilize inhalations for that to calm that down is really a fabulous thing to work with.
Yeah. Now, obviously, when we look at oils that are better known in aromatherapy, such as maybe lavender or frankincense or peppermint, there's been lots of clinical research to kind of really back up what the power of these oils are. Now, obviously, they have similar chemistry to Fragonia, so we can kind of carry some of those assumptions over. But has there been much clinical research done on Fragonia at all?
Look, there has been research, and yes, unfortunately, a lot of things, yes, they have started today, these days, starting to record a lot more, and there are different areas we can go on to look at that research to show how it has worked with those areas of anxiety and stress levels. But it's a long process. New oils are a long process, and we have so many new oils coming into the industry from Australia as well. So it does take time for that to go through the processes of research. And yeah, but it is happening. It is happening for us. Yeah, for sure.
I want to shift approach a little bit for just a moment. We've kind of been talking, about the chemistry and how you as an aromatherapist use Fragonia. There are going to
Yeah.
be people that are watching this video that have purchased a Fragonia at one point in time and it's sitting in their home, and they're not an aromatherapist. They're a regular house mum or house dad, or they're living at home with their beautiful Fragonia. How would you recommend? What are like the top three ways or so that maybe they could use this, that they're going to get the most benefit out of it? Maybe using it proactively to avoid any kind of challenges, but also maybe when an issue does arise in the house.
First of all, don't share it. It's too valuable. No, actually, I think that when there may be stress levels, it's lovely to put them in their burners. That's a great way of using it, obviously, in their diffusers and things like that. I think when they've got little things like kids a bit stressed out, or, that afternoon rush time where they say it's the witching hour and things like that, 2 drops of your Fragonia on a tissue, give it a bit of a rub, have a nice little smell of that, settle down, a bit of good breathing, also puts you back into some form of balance as well. I mean, there's one way. Nothing ever stops you from actually getting some proper disperser and placing a couple of drops with a couple of drops of lavender in a disperser, please. I do say that you know what the dispersants are, to be able to go into a bath, soak in a bath and enjoy it, because really and truly that small molecular structure becomes a wonderful inhalant. It works beautifully on the mind, so people do have a tendency to rest. Great for scatty children. So some lavender and some of the Fragonia, but you must use a disperser when you're going to put it into the water.
Yep. Otherwise, because we know oil and water doesn't mix, it's just going to club
Correct.
together. That's not going to be, yeah, not going to work the best type of thing. Yeah, very much for sure. Now, one other thing that I found really interesting in your book is that you actually had a recipe for an aromatic anxiety solution, a mouth swish solution.
Mm-hmm.
I've never even thought of using aromatherapy in that respect beyond kind of oral health or something like that. Could you explain a little bit about how you've used this in the past and
Sure.
what it's all about?
So, first of all, Adam, if I could be very straight and very honest with you, I think that if people would like to work in this level, they do really need to have some very strong, substantial studies about using through the mouth and things like that. For instance, for myself, I've been studying aromatic medicine since 2001. And I mean, that's a long time. And yes, probably in Australia, I may be the only one that really does practice with it and have been practicing with it for some years. But you need to be very aware with putting anything towards or within your mouth. This way, we're only working in what we call a buccal or buccal and sublingual way. We're not actually swallowing this. We're actually working it, creating like a solution with it, and then holding it in the mouth, swishing around, holding it in the mouth, which gives a little bit of that infusion into the body to help calm that person down, to help with all that anxiety and grieving and things like that. And then most of this is just washed away out through the mouth. There are many ways of application, but truly and honestly, you sincerely need to know the correct methods and dosage. Otherwise, there is trouble.
What I'm feeling for just someone at home, there is something so powerful about breathing. One thing I remember once upon a time, it was actually, we get wisdom from everywhere, but it was from a personal trainer. When I used to lift heavy weights, they'd tell me to, I'd hold my breath. And, think about when we're angry, when we're sad, when we're frustrated, when we're anxious, any of those negative emotions, we shorten our breath, don't we? And so how we breathe communicates to the rest of our body how we're doing. That's what the personal trainer told me. So I think, like you said, on a tissue, in an inhaler or in a diffuser, and just breathing it in, but actually even not just kind of whacking it in the diffuser and running off to the chaos, but even finding a few moments just to stop and maybe 5 breaths, take a deep breath in and just allow yourself to really, wash over you in that
I
way.
do know one really, really nice blend, and I will share this because I have some wonderful friends of mine that are extremely spiritual. I go sometimes with them. We have like a different type of meditation. I'm not very good at meditation. I'm no good at yoga. I'm too much of a high-paced person to relax that way. But we do a special get together sometimes, and mine is what I call like a dancing meditation. So the one thing I do is I use frankincense, and I know, see, I talk about all Australian oils, but there's oils that are so unique to other countries that I also use them as well. So I use frankincense, I use mandarin petitgrain, and I use Fragonia. Now I work with these oils, and we actually hold these oils, and we've got them in the tissues, and we smell, and then we do music, and we work for like a half an hour in different types of things, and then we lay down, and then we do our breathing. And oh my gosh, I cannot explain how, for me, it's like I can really fall into a wonderful, meditated, gentle state without feeling like, oh my gosh, I've got to get up, I've got 1,000 things to do. So there is all ways of meditation, maybe not yoga, but these three particular oils work so well within that area with breathing. It's just so wonderful to be able to help you with that breathing, and breathing correctly is really, really important.
Very much. I can see that application being used both for adults, but even with children, if you just kind of need to get rid of all that nervous or that restless or that
Yes.
stressful energy, do it with the movement and then relax rather than trying to just straight relax could be a really powerful
Yeah.
combination with those oils. Yeah.
Yeah, so I worked a wonderful workshop that I run, which is, well, obviously here on the Gold Coast, but I run this wonderful little workshop where we get six people together, and I've set up this little music thing, and we get the essential oils, and we work with that, and they've got to bring all their pillows, and then at the end of it we all lay down. It's like, they all fall down kind of thing. So it's wonderful, but it really works, and those three particular oils are really amazing. So anybody that may want to go and do meditation or yoga and would like to use that, take that blend. It's a lovely blend, and they really smell wonderful together.
Now, before I ask my final question that I've been asking a lot about many different essential oils, Deb, I know you probably are brimming with that much knowledge about Fragonia that we could probably sit here and talk for several hours. But is there anything else that you think people need to know about Fragonia that we haven't talked about yet?
I think that we have covered it, but the biggest thing is that for me, Fragonia is one of those oils that if you feel like, how people would say to you, gee, I need to have this on the shelf because this is really important. Like, if I feel for pain or something like that, then I would really reach for something like my cloves or, your wintergreen, depending on what it is, or even, certain rosemaries and things like that. But Fragonia is really one of those that I would say is really important in your toolbox, especially if you're looking at harmonizing.
Mm. And probably so, whereas other oils may be stronger on the physical realm, this probably would sit more the emotional, mental realm
Yeah.
as an essential oil.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is why it's always good to have that particular, and I love it. I love the safety of this particular oil. And that's, to me, it's like, that's what I said, it really has got that safety factor behind it. And because of it, it makes it a really usable oil, a really positive oil that can be utilized for all ages.
Mm. Well, you've kind of preempted my final question that I'd like to ask. Myself and Elizabeth Ashley, you've been a guest on our weekly podcast where we look at different essential oils, and you've shared about pineapple myrtle, which is amazing. And
I love that.
we're
I
up
love it.
we're up to about 70 different oils that we've explored now. So we've kind of been asking ourselves at the end of each episode, you know, do we need this oil in our collection? There are oils like peppermint and lavender you have to have. And then we're like, well, oils like maybe Palo Santo or spikenard, they're real special occasion ones. You don't need to rush out and buy them and be using them in your
Oh,
diffuser
no, no,
every
no.
day.
You need to
No,
have this.
you definitely need to have it for
Yeah.
that. Well, I guess when we look at how much, we talk to people, there is a lot of things happening domestically. There are a lot of things happening internationally that are causing overwhelm. And then we go into what's happening into each individual's lives. Anxiety. I remember talking to a school teacher recently, oh no, a school psychologist, a primary school psychologist. And I said, oh, do you have much to do there? She said, flat out. I'm like, with what? She's like, anxiety. I'm like, of 6 to 12-year-olds. So as an anxiety oil, and that it's safe to have in the home and has those
And,
multiple uses, it's
and
amazing.
Adam, remember, anytime people can contact me as well if they want to order any essential oils, or I'm happy to blend it as well. If anybody wants me to particularly blend something, it's possible because sometimes it's more difficult in other countries. Some people just can't get onto to getting things like Fragonia, you know what I mean? But some other people, some other countries are quite within their realm of getting that. I mean, it just depends. There are certain Australian essential oils that are a little bit more difficult to get your hands on than others. But Fragonia is actually quite easy. So,
It's easy to get and it's worth getting. I think it's definitely worth it's one I would never be without.
yeah, and you got to have it. You got your lavender, you got your Fragonia.
Exactly. Well, Debbie, of course, if you're interested in learning more about not only Fragonia, but all of the Australian essential oils, this book has a whole range of native Australian essential oils that many people haven't heard of. We've talked about a couple of myrtles, but there are amazing types of myrtle, like rose myrtle, I think, is in here as well. Mango myrtle. I think we also, eucalyptus. Australians you have eucalyptus. We actually have 700 different species, and many of them produce amazing essential oils like peppermint gum, which I find to be the best minty smell. And probably that and the bushmint, which we get from Australia as well. Really, really
Yeah.
nice. Plus, you've explored the chemistry of non-native plants such as lavenders and the citruses in this book as well. So it's really, really great if you're an aromatherapist or just for an at-home user as well. So I'd really recommend that.
Oh, thank you, Adam.
Debbie, thank you so much for your time today and sharing a little bit about this amazing native Australian essential oil. There are so many amazing Australian native essential oils that are out there and available. And I'm rapt that we could dive a little bit deeper into the Goldilocks oil, the one that I'm passionate about, and I know you're so passionate about as well. Of course, if people would like to learn a little bit more about the spiritual attributes of this oil, stick around because the following video will be my deep dive into Fragonia and its holistic uses. But Debbie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, and let's hope we see you again soon, hey?